And we're live.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, everybody.
We're super excited. We have another guest today. Mark, would you like to introduce our guest?
Yes, this is my friend Ellen Morey, who, I don't know, known each other 12, 13 years, something like that, kind of. Ellen is a musician. That's the context I got to know you first. It's traveling around with Seth Martin doing music. But you have your fingers in all kinds of fun things in the world, including being a parent, which is the thing we're wanting to talk about today. Today we're talking about parenting during a pandemic. There's all kinds of angles we can talk about this, and I know that Ellen has insights to share, and this would be a fun conversation to have. Just to introduce myself, I'm Mark Van Steenwyk, the director for the Center for Prophetic Imagination. Dan and I have been doing this now for the 11th episode, 11 times.
Yes. And I'm Daniel Wolpert. Work and direct with MICA, the Minnesota Institute of Contemplation and Healing. It's great to be with everyone today again. And yeah, maybe, Ellen, we could just start by you sharing a bit about your experience of parenting in a pandemic. Oh, and we also need to let everybody know that there are these lovely little bird sounds in the background, and Ellen's going to explain what those are too.
Can you zoom into the picture of the little chickies too? Is that or can you not do that?
I would reposition the entire setup I have going.
Never mind, it's not worth it. Just imagine, everyone. Imagine that they're there.
Maybe at the end of the episode.
Okay, that'd be fun.
That'll be a treat for people to look forward to.
That's an incentive for people not to drop out of the broadcast early.
There are 10 baby chickies, as my 4-year-old son calls them, in the room, in our sharing room where we live. And before the pandemic started, we were already staying in a household with family members. There are 4 adults. Avi is almost 4. 3 cats, a rabbit, a fish, a snail. Now 10 baby chicks. And at one point, there was a puppy, but that was quickly too much.
Yes.
And so now we are all, in this house much more of the time. And a lot of that experience has just intensified what was already going on. I think for all people, the pandemic has sort of intensified problems that already existed, and parents are sort of already dealing with an intense thing. Parenting is an intense thing.
It sure can be, yeah.
Yes. Either intensely good or intensely stressful or intensely, there's lots of different directions you can go with intensity. But this pandemic has had me thinking about what exactly are goals of parenting and how does the pandemic affect those goals?
It's a good way of framing it. And I'm just noticing that all 3 of us are parents, but at kind of different stages of the parenting experience. How old is Avi?
He will be 4 in June.
4?
Yeah, my son Jonas just turned 12, and then Dan has 2 little boys.
Yes, 2 little boys, almost 30 and 27.
Awesome.
And so right. So part of my experience in parenting in the pandemic is that my kids are very far away from me, and I don't know when I'm going to physically get to be with them again, which has been really hard.
Yeah.
My mom has been experiencing that a bit too with 2 of my siblings.
So I like that concept of goals of parenting. I guess another way that I was thinking about it was, yeah, just what is our kind of vision or narrative of what parenting is, right? We've been talking a lot on this broadcast about the issue of narratives and dominant narratives, whether they're economic, religious, social, political. But we also have narratives about parenting, right? How we're supposed to do that, what's good parenting, what's not good parenting, expectations about things like school and family time. And yeah, and this is putting all of those to the test in a lot of ways.
Yes. So narrative therapy and sort of the spiritual direction narrative path is kind of one of the answers that I've been finding for a lot of the questions that the pandemic is bringing up. My sort of, I feel so cheesy saying this, but my sort of like vision statement for parenting is to co-create a community where children can flourish, including my own son. And my mission is to be consistently adequate. And someday it is my dream to receive a Mother's Day card that says, "Mom, you've always been consistently adequate."
It's amazing how quickly before parenting, or even before, any relationship, I would have thought I wanted to be awesome. But now if I can become consistently adequate, I feel like I'm winning at life.
That's great. I love that. So that fits in very well with when I became a parent, I developed the 80-20 rule. And I very quickly realized that once I became a parent, I could not do 80% of the things I used to do. And the other 20% I could not do well. And so if I kept to that level of expectation, I felt like I was doing pretty good.
I had a friend share that rule with me when Avi was first born, and it was really helpful to hear.
Yeah.
Colin's feedback, an admirable and realistic goal. I mean, I'm not even sure how realistic it is for me sometimes to be consistently adequate.
Just adulting without kids can be tricky.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like before I had a kid, I didn't know I thought, I don't have any free time. I'm busy. I'm not doing anything well. And then when I had a kid, it's like, now I'm doing everything worse, including trying to make sure this kid ends up, better off than he would be if he were just left on the side of the road. Like that's,
or just alive.
Or just alive. That's the number one rule of parenting for me is if he can make it to 18 and not be dead, then I figure I've won.
Right. But here's the thing. I mean, we're sort of laughing about this right now, but actually, Ellen, that is a very radical rule for our society, right? Because we are constantly hearing about, being outstanding and being your best self and being incredible. And,
yes,
women, there's this whole superwoman narrative, right? You've got to do it all and you've got to be all. And, we have to provide what is totally outstanding for our kid all the time. And of course, all of that is not only almost abusive in its level of expectation, but it's totally ridiculous. And so, to be able to settle into what is a very compassionate goal of being consistently adequate that's very revolutionary, really. And I think it's even more helpful during this pandemic time when suddenly we've been thrown, this giant monkey wrench into everything we're doing.
I think that rule is a good balancing reminder for me because especially if you're looking at what other people are doing via the internet, you're seeing a lot of people who are like, now I have all this time to do all the things. I'll start a business. I'll write a book. I'll make my blog amazing. And then there's the people who are like, I'm doing everything in my pajamas. I have a consistent half-gallon of ice cream that I'm eating all day long. And I'm just watching TV. And like neither of those things are really that helpful in the long term. They're not, neither of those are sustainable. And yeah, like spend some time there if that's what you need. I hope that consistently adequate can be helpful balancing. And like, yeah, I was hoping also to talk about some of the things that I feel like have helped me feel like I'm more consistently adequate, some of the strategies. If people have a lot of extra time for studying and they are looking about ways to be a, I don't want to say better parent, but if you want to feel like you're a better parent, I think some of the things I was thinking about in preparation for this might be helpful. If you can get a copy of the book, and there's a free PDF online, How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk. That book changed my life. I think I read it before I was even a parent. The first chapter is a better summary of nonviolent communication than anything else that I know about, even better than Marshall Rosenberg's book for people who are into nonviolent communication. And that book, I think, clearly helps people internalize paying attention, focused attention, and making observations instead of judgments, figuring out how emotions are signals for needs and how to problem solve with children for how to meet their own needs so they can learn to resource themselves with autonomy. And those are a lot of different sort of catchphrases of nonviolent communication. Maybe after this, I could like type a bunch of things in the comments as well, because there's a lot there. And I'm hoping that even if people don't have children or any interest in ever having children, that things that we're talking about, you know, these still apply to you, because I believe that we are every age we've ever been. You still have some toddler self inside.
That's true.
And you still have some preteen or teenager self, and learning how to treat children who are still physically children with compassion helps you sort of parent yourself. And one of the biggest things in parenting is sort of completing tasks that, like development stage tasks, that you maybe didn't have enough resources to complete when you were physically in that stage.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's great. So we've got some comments here.
Yeah, I'll throw them up. This first one from CK: dealing with only phones for internet access, but our data plan cannot handle a hotspot. Our children also go to 2 different schools. So doing can't afford internet makes distance learning almost impossible. Our children also go to 2 different schools. This whole distance learning thing, you know, we've had a commenter, Maria, the last couple of days, who's mentioned the kind of the blessing that people are experiencing with maybe doing homeschooling who haven't before. And I know homeschooling can be a controversial topic, but all of a sudden people are having to homeschool, but in ways that are not, it's not like we have a bunch of curriculum already sitting around and thought it through. It's like been thrust upon us. And for my son, and I'm assuming for CK's kids, the school district tried to come up with something real fast during the spring break, and now my son is going to have to be looking at a screen all the time, which is what he wants to do anyways with video games. But now he has to do it for his learning. So it's just this whole new way of of having to parent and navigate that stuff. It's overwhelming.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dan.
Well, yeah, no, I was just going to say, I mean, this CK's comment here really brings up this huge issue of the internet divide, class divide in our society. And one of the things that we're realizing is a real justice issue is the fact that we have not made the internet a utility. And so it is this privileged thing to have, and suddenly we're realizing like, oh no, this actually is about as essential as electricity or running water. And yeah, there's a lot of people who do not have internet access, computers, things like that, and so when the school district goes, oh, great, we're going to go to online learning, it's like, well, what if we don't have online anything?
Yeah, in Elkhart, where I live, the school district created some like hotspot hubs so that students can gather, but that sort of defeats the distancing purposes.
Yeah, it does.
And they're always the last, I don't know, 5 years there have been hubs in different places downtown, but the Wi-Fi that is provided, I want to be diplomatic, not the best Wi-Fi I've ever used. And so, yeah, I was working as a substitute teacher before the pandemic, and on days that regular teachers have substitutes, they already were sort of doing this distance learning for the most part. The school where I did substitute had used iPads, and the teachers would put the lessons on the iPad, and so I was just sort of making sure that that's what they were doing on the iPad during that time. And what I found most of the day I was really doing was helping the students find the narrative in their life that would motivate them to do that work. Because they just wanted to like make memes and do pranks and try to trick me into thinking that they were really doing the work. And I would have to plead with them basically and say like, I cannot care about your future more than you have to care about your own future. And so I think that parents maybe could create the narrative in their house for school more about what is school going to do for you, and then focus on like, what are you getting out of it, and help them see like, this is how this will help you in the future. Because I chose certain grades to substitute because some that were too young didn't care about distant future yet, and then others were already sort of set in their path. And so, yeah, when students are still malleable in what the story is, moldable, yes, teachable. That's a sweet spot for having positive influence. And I think a lot of the parents stuck at home with the distance learning are finding, the society that we lived in before this had a lot of things to be depressed about, but that was hidden. And now that's being uncovered, and everybody is hit with the whammy of this this society is really depressing. And so how are parents supposed to encourage and motivate people to care about their individual future if they're like dealing with that themselves?
Yeah, this brings up the question that Dan was suggested before we started the broadcast. He was noticing that there isn't a lot of conversation about how this experience will change the perceptions of our children. So like I remember in I think third grade was when the Challenger blew up, and so all these little kids around the country at the same time were watching. Yay! Look, Christy McAuliffe's going to space. Why is it? What's happening? And it explodes. And all these children are traumatized. Same happened with 9/11. I was a educational assistant while 9/11 was happening, and we were watching we would turn on the news. All the kids were watching the first tower in flames, and we all saw the second tower get hit. And again, trauma, anxiety, fear, and those things shaped our perception of the world. And it's hard for me not to assume this will be more of an effect. And what does that mean for our kids? What does it mean for us as parents now to help our children make sense of the world in light of this? And what does it mean for them to become emerging into older childhood and adulthood eventually, with everything kind of laid bare a little bit as it is right now?
Yeah. And to me, I mean, one of the things I just realize that I keep talking with people about is that it is okay to feel overwhelmed by the sense of uncertainty.
Yeah.
Right. And that it's okay to not know what you're doing. It's okay to feel like I'm in the midst of this massive transition and I'm still in shock. And I think that, I mean, one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is, a family that lives in a small apartment on the, 10th floor of some apartment building in the middle of a city and, does not have access to the outdoors or to bigger spaces. And, my guess is that there have got to be a lot of people that are really, really overwhelmed right now. And so, how is it that we are helping one another and ourselves to just have permission to say, we got to do what we got to do and figure this out. And to also teach our kids that it's okay to be figuring something out and to be uncertain. It's okay to create this new narrative. Like, okay, so I'm not going to school for 6 hours a day, but that's all right. I'm learning how to cook, or I'm learning how to build Legos, or I'm learning how to, I heard about some parent that was distressed that her son wanted to learn how to fix the kitchen sink rather than do school. And it's like, no, that's awesome. Like, fix the kitchen sink.
I wish my son knew how to do some basic plumbing.
Right.
Mark, you're always hinting that you need plumbing skills.
I mean, it's just, I think I'm a competent person, but I'm anxious about that I'm going to make everything worse. And so I don't even try to dive in. Some people are like, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to tile my bathroom. I'm like, I don't want to screw up a bunch of things and make my life harder for myself. But if I had a little plumber child to do these things, maybe he could learn some electrical work on the side. That'd be sweet.
Well, part of my parenting outlook is I would like to have as much sort of sweet perfection, nothing can touch this moment times to create strong memories and like scent and body memories that can be triggered if Avi is in his 30s or 50s or 80s and has like a really low rock bottom point, that something can trigger this sweet perfection memory that like that would be a success. But also the consistently adequate thing, like have that protection be permeable enough that he still is exposed to, I'll use the umbrella term, suffering, whether that's replicated through chores and service projects, or just it gets through the cracks of my ability, but coach and guide him through that, so that he has empathy and urgency. I'm hoping that he will not be entitled or spoiled by like being a good parent.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, back to this time being formative. We're already seeing, like, I've been to the grocery store about once since this, and I've already noticed in myself like a recoiling from other people. And like, so I had this friend in college who was very timid, and another friend said about her, it's like when she was really little, her parents took her by the shoulders and said, "The world is a dangerous place."
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like we have to guard against that happening to this generation. And I think about the movie Life is Beautiful, where whether or not it's realistic, it's a good metaphor for what we're going through now, that a man has a young child, his son, with him in a concentration camp where clearly everything is terrible, but the kid just thinks it's a game the whole time. And I see that movie as a tremendous example of successful parenting, where you're going through, do we swear on this?
You can swear. Go for it.
Okay. You're going through a shitstorm and the child has no clue, but they're safe and protected. You know, there's parents who are like, let him experience the world. It's a school of hard knocks. Like, but I just have to push back against that, because children are precious, and yeah, like, they're going to find that out. They don't have to find it out from you.
Mm-hmm.
One other thing that I was wanting to mention, we talked a little bit about how the internet is becoming part of class, already is. I've really talked mostly about things that affect people in the class demographic that I'm part of. Mm-hmm. And I just want to acknowledge that there is a lot more about anything that was intense before, abuse or hunger. Child hunger is a huge problem. Mm-hmm. And you've touched on some of those things in general in previous vidcasts of this, but those things are directly related to parenting and the pandemic, and anything that we can do to help mitigate those circumstances will be a valuable work.
Absolutely.
We've got some comments here. I'm just going
to let's throw them on up.
Let's do them up. CK writes that right now only 48 days left of school till summer break. There's also the pressures of, are these grades going to apply to graduate? Like, that's a big question. Like, is my son getting enough credit hours? He also says we also use workbooks over the summer, just being parents to keep their minds active. But we've noticed, like Mark said, these distance learning programs seem to be thrown together and the interface is spotty and confusing. It's not they're doing their best, but last minute planning is never as good. Also, Colin writes, as a former homeschooler, unschooling is still vital schooling. Given certain family situations, I spent a couple of years learning about hospice and how to accompany family members as they approach death. I would have never learned that in school. I think the question of like what my son most needs to learn about in the world is more of an open question than maybe even has been before.
So I was homeschooled until college, and a lot of that was we would classify and describe ourselves as unschoolers. And yeah, I do want to push back against the narrative of homeschooling, because even for the homeschoolers, this is still being stuck at home and not actually doing the school curriculum as planned. But yeah, I think homeschoolers have more experience of not putting so much pressure on sort of the arbitrary school imposed parts of education. Actually, the parts where homeschoolers would say that's contrary to education, that's school.
Right. Now, and we've got what is Maria saying here?
Here's a comment from Maria. My experience dittos Ellen's experience. One of the things I try to emphasize with my students is that the things we learn give us opportunities. Part of the joy of homeschooling for me was the opportunity to get my education all over again. This crisis is having us learn all kinds of new things. Our attitude towards learning new things is either a gift or a curse to our children. The more we can embrace the joy of learning, the more resilience we give our children.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think of those arbitrary things as sort of little pieces of the violent system. And part of parenting is to create baffling structures. So baffling is where you have things that almost overlap but don't, so that anything flowing through that has to go through a maze instead of just flowing straight. And so as a parent, that permeable protection is like a baffle where it filters through me before it gets to the child. And so with distance learning, anything that you can do to remind your child that education is about becoming a more whole and complete person and human being, and it's not about grades. I mean, graduating is still an important deal in our society, but even my friends at the seminary here in town are like, wait, we don't want these grades to be affected. Can we retake them and retake these classes? And then other students are like, we don't want to have to redo this whole year. What do we do? Like, it's not just.
It's programmed in pretty deep. Yeah. Well, and I do think that in general, I loved Maria's comment there. I do think that in general, I feel like one of the keys to making it through this well is really embracing that openness and learning. And I think that that's something that's a part of healthy parenting to do for our kids, and then to continue to do for us, because one of our reactions to uncertainty is to kind of freeze. And the more that we can relax and be open to learning whatever it is that we have to learn as we're going through this, the better off I think we'll be, and the better off our kids will be.
So true.
Well, we're pretty much past our time. But this has been a great conversation.
Yes, thank you, Ellen. Really appreciate you coming on.
So much for having me. This has been.
And I like your metaphor of baffling, because my son finds me baffling.
I was going to say I was a little baffled by that myself.
I love the pun.
I had to get a pun in. Recently, Ellen asked me. I posted this thing like, make me choose between two things, and Ellen said, become a vegan or never tell a pun again. And I realized, like, I enjoy eating meat more than I enjoy puns, but puns are part of my core identity. So if I gave that up, something inside of me would.
That was a good one, Ellen.
Thanks. I'm usually terrible at those choose between two things questions.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody.
Wait.
The
chickens.
The chickens.
Oh, yeah. The chickens.
Let's close out with the chickens.
It's remembering to keep your agreements.
Yes. Let's see these little.
Oh, and while we're moving to the chickens, just to let everybody know that we will not be doing this on Monday. So our next cast will be on Tuesday, and there are the chickens.
And I'm about to feed them new water.
Nice.
in case anybody is worried.
I hope it's not too expensive of water, but it's cheap water.
It will be bathroom
Cheap,
tap water.
cheap.
Ha,
I went to the
All right.
baloneyest pun I could to close out. Now people won't feel bad that they're missing Monday.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.